Penjire sangye ndo parasho sangye chedan soke chanam la chancho pardo dani kyab sanche dage jinso yebe chanam Dola penjira sangye ndo parasho sangye chedan soke chanam la chancho pardo dani kyab sanche dage jinso yebe chanam Dola penjire sangye ndo parasho Semchen tamche dewa tan dewe gyu tan dembara gyu Semchen tamche dungal tan dungal ye gyu tan chawara gyu Semchen tamche dungal mebe dewa tan mindawara Semchen tamche nyirin chadan nidan chaw tan nyamla nebara gyu ruchi Semchen tam dewa tan dewe gyu tan dembara gyu Semchen tamche dungal Dunga ye gyudan chawarak. Simjan damje dunga mebe dewa dan minda warak. Simjan damje nyirin chadan nidan cha. Dan nyamla ne bara gyurji. Simjan tam dewa dan dewe gyudan dambara gyurji. Simjan tam dunga ye gyudan chawarak. Simjan damje dunga mebe dewa dan minda warak. Simchen damje nyirin chadan nidan cha tanyam la nebara gyuruji Simchen damje dewa dan dewe gyudan dambara gyuji Simchen damje dungal dan dungal gi gyudan chawara Simchen damje dungal mebe dewa dan menda wari Simchen damje nyirin chadan nidan cha tanyam la nebara gyuruji Sajibe oji Chöje mendo Jiroli Nyedege Mbandi Sange Jendo Medembu Wai Dukenanda Jen Lai Chevajo Idamanguru Renamendala Kaniyatayami.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all beings rest in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. Sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon, I imagined as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata Yami.
Okay, to sing some Altawa Tanjo Tambachira Tambachin, Tanjabe Kodam de la Chaza Los. Kanji Menso Datu Chebadans, Jingin in a Dachin, Namdo Mebe Simkisu, Taton and Nagel Hom Zedicala, Ta Karsore, Dajin Jet Sar Kanzachiki. Dajin Jet Sar Kanzachiki, some Tantanji, Sungores. Menso se member Sidicala. 다 누바보 란레 젬바 수술에 껴지어라 마지 삼년에서 마지어래 란진진 공부인데 근지 대지지 이 고사들 디기 삼단단데 랑기타 랑기 삼단단데 랍침에 삼로데 퀘탄데 제네는 퀘 연된데라다 콜디 고사페니 삼로데 고사페니 아니 퀘 연된데라다 타도제야래 어떻게 다 menso 다 손레날 가려잖아 랑라 냠파 도베 인덴다 따때 좀 냠파 지지 다 다진 쟁이 제창에 가사지 가사 젠다지 아니 젠바지 가려래 랑레 토
Really?
어떻게 숨이어래 다 랑라 냠바들라 젠셈 고미야 랑레 토들라 아니 간제 고사드 포야래 고사 포거다 어두스지네니 전송과에 대송과레스.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and translate what Geshe-la said before we cut off and then continue on. So here at the outset, at the beginning of the teachings, our motivation for this activity is very important, and the motivation that we should embrace is the motivation of bodhicitta. So please embrace the mind of bodhicitta. And so last, when going back to the text, The Way of the Bodhisattva, we have been looking at what we had been looking at before, just kind of briefly, going back a little bit, is we were looking at exchanging oneself for others, meaning exchanging one's own perspective of self-importance to one's most important objective being accomplishing the aims of others rather than oneself. And so we looked at the way that we think about this and the way we go about training in this. And so once we have understood the importance of exchanging a self-centered attitude for an altruistic one, once we have finished that, once we have already entered into that new mindset, then now within the structure of the text, we have already looked at the faults of what a self-cherishing attitude offers for us and looked at the benefits of what an altruistic attitude offers to us. And so once again, the text now where we enter into looks at, again, the faults of one and the benefits of others. And here in this particular section, we once again look at the mind that is self-cherishing. Look at the faults of why this, why this is not a favorable mindset. This is done both in a concise verses and in a more extensive way, and over several verses, using several verses. And so now, once we have already switched and we have this new perspective of the altruistic attitude, this again, how we now can employ or practice with this mindset to look again at the faults of self-cherishing is looked at in concise and extensive way. So now we look into the trainings, and we have the explanation of training, which means in very few words, the complete meaning is expressed. And then later it will also go into breaking this apart in like a more extensive way, using more verses and more explanation. So the very concise verse that explains this practice that we are now looking to undertake, this training, is in verse number 140. This is the condensed verse that tells us, everything is there. And so verse 140 says, so now understanding, Geshe-la says that we have now already understood and taken up this new view, this new lens and perspective of caring for others more. So now, verse number 140, take others, lower, higher, equal as yourself, identify yourself as other, and then without another thought, immerse yourself in envy, pride, and rivalry. And so what's being said here in verse 140? So it says lower, higher, and equal as yourself. So this just means there are some that we may consider, lower to us. They may not have as much. They may be are just a little bit more depraved. And then there's others that we may find have higher realization, maybe gain or title and so forth, those that we feel are superior and those that we feel are on equal ground. So we put ourselves in the shoes of others while we then, for example, for those that we feel are equal to us, we now purposefully now call up a feeling of competitiveness against someone. And so whenever we have are in a mode of self-cherishing and we have strong either competitiveness, in this case, we now instigate that to see how it feels now that we are actually out of, that mindset, but we're stepping back into it for a moment to really purposefully meditate on this feeling of competitiveness. And now what this mind is like to feel so competitive about one of your equals. The purpose of this is, once again, we're pointing out the fault in it, but now you can really feel it. You have put yourself in the shoes, for example, of an equal to yourself. And then you generate those, feelings of competitiveness, and you feel what that mindset feels like. And so then for those that, if you put yourself in a lower position, then you instigate and bring up feelings of superiority, feelings of having great qualities and feelings of being superior, and how it feels to feel like that in comparison of someone else. And once again, then you think about, what this emotion is like. And we can do the same, with jealousy. So we can put ourselves in the position of someone who's, higher than us, and then the other individual is instigating the feelings of jealousy. So then you really feel jealousy, not really to be afflicted, but just to revisit that emotion, that feeling, that jealousy, that envy of wanting, to, have what they have, what someone else has. So purposefully, you put yourself back in just to meditate once again on what jealousy feels like for the purpose of pointing out the fault in it. So it is creating a scenario, this new person who's already learned about and has already fully taken on and accepted an altruistic mind, once again puts themselves in the shoes of another, in the role of another, and then takes on the role of either feeling jealous at that person or competitive towards that person, or superior to that person, just to revisit those feelings from the new perspective. And again, the reason to do this is to reinvestigate and point fault at why these attitudes that come from self-cherishing are not favorable and not appropriate.
samlutane ranjin yaktur samlutan dusena ranjin gi könde chuchur thoyake tapshejire ingyu tapshedire.
And so, what's the difference here? Why are we now taking up this particular technique? What difference does this offer us in our practice and in our progress? And it's because if we now reinvestigate, step back into really strong self-cherishing attitude, really strong emotional reaction to someone, really strong jealousy, for example, if we, insert ourselves back into strong negative emotions, again, now that we have already done all of that background of knowing why it's not beneficial and why it is negative, but if we reinsert ourselves back into it really strongly, really meditate on it, really elicit these feelings, it will become very clear in a very strong way why they're negative and why they're wrong.
That's penamiji mini rajenje sarje miji rajengi ma samlu khoram tang mitu benji arwa tang mishik tang manyungke the ranjin be shu chumbo kumbu inde genji miji tape tele be toba thoyo ache yendenche tab digala perna
I mean, mi shipa de yongten chempo sana rang chenjin sarne.
O tan dusche mi ni de tape ranjen je be nyamnen chege mi ni je khoni toban na che
Laso
ji mila debit ji mila liza sing je roa tan ranjin kumbu inde gendara perna meri zananda ye kare yam min jenda je
laso
ani ji ge ne be janju seba legend zo je ani be Christing is me bed Satombo in the Genchi.
Oh laso mi shipa de
Satombo Miniba Ninian Tobanyanya del Toje. Sa Karza me David Gita Nyamnen that Christe singing this some Guntango Mara Ranjin pe mother Jenjin can some Jengi and then some Guntango Marwa. That David oh so and a Chris get some tanta de rang samta de Chris some tanta two some tanta some look goshes Jabolorta. Kuni.
So Chris Sena
that Ranchin Guni Kumbu in the Jenjin some make organ middle Mingla. Chris Samdana Pejana.
Okay, yeah.
David Ranchin Be Kundatan Jenjin Yenden Yamnen chicken the che.
JB.
Oh, David singing the.
Okay.
What are those Samdan de Gala? David Chris K. Samata, the question of that? Kora Samata, Chris K. Samata Tane, those samlo kosan jawre je yonde kala ta ranjinjin la shira kyon chimbu yumba thongore ote kyon chale ki tapshejre ote di tila ene karsawa thado gombade samtang otenjire.
So, for example, we could make the example like this. Let's take 4 different individuals. Of the 4, 2 of them have already understood and evolved into a very altruistic attitude. They've seen the faults in being self-centered, and they have already really kind of turned over the new leaf, so to speak. One of the people, one individual, has never even given the thought of serving others, caring about others, never given it a thought. So wrapped up in themselves, this has just been their mission and their MO from the get-go. They don't know anything about the training of exchanging yourself or others. They are just fully full on in self-agenda and egotistic action. And then the 4th, there is one individual of great qualities and great understanding who as well has actually even higher in qualities and practice, very high level of practice, a bodhisattva, on the bodhisattva bhumi. So someone who is very accomplished and really has experience and realization. So we have these 4 individuals. Now, if you take, let's say, the first 2 who know about altruism, let's call one of them Debbie. This, Debbie knows about altruism, is really practicing altruism, has understood the faults in an egotistic existence, and has turned over the new leaf. The second person who has no clue, is very egotistic. This is Chris. Let's put Debbie in, let's let them change. Let's let them swap mindsets. Let Debbie take over, Chris's mind take over Debbie. And all of a sudden she is experiencing through Chris's very egotistic and self-agendaed attitude. And now Debbie is experiencing what it feels like to generate egotistic attitudes and emotions and be self-centered and self-clinging and all about herself, taking over, Chris's egotistic attitude. So now Debbie re-experiences what it feels like to be Chris. And so that's why it's very powerful to step back into it in this way. So when we talk about meditating, eliciting an emotion such as jealousy, this is what we're talking about. Step into someone's shoes who hasn't figured it out yet and experience it again and feel it again and just get right into it and see what it feels like.
어떤 두스 삼단들 타치도 삼로 고사데 보용들라 고 란치진나 빼 견데 슈춤부 통고래 견 참어 인제는 원진 통고래 되게 답시를 인규란다.
So this is a means, this is a method to take a mindset, a mental attitude, in this case the mental attitude of being selfish and self-caring and self-clinging and self-identified, and all of this, and stepping back into it, and in such a strong way can really show one again the faults in that attitude. One will easily be able to recognize it as a unfavorable state of mentality, even like subtle self-clinging and self-agenda, you will be able to sense. But you really just let go of yourself and put yourself into someone who is identified like that and live through them and see what it feels like from your new perspective of understanding.
토사들라 신샤거도 어다 때가 나신 렌셈 고디가라 파조데 다 수수 도번냠나야 르인 주번유로 풀담 때니기 개발 전부 차가워와 때니 내가 텐다지 말라 중나 냠벨 로치디가라 렌셈 소리 차가워와 어다 다 나잘 곰디가라 전주서바 사통보 너베니 연된 전부 시부지어래 수수때 디 삼다데가라 텐디 연된 알데나 냠데 케디 포팔레기어와 तेला ngajar yiming tar mada de ti ngajar ra mare te su kanga pe migo ngoni migo semda mare oda tende ki chebar kanjara 진진 견 사이게 탑시지를 mada zenda chebar yo mare.
And then in the scenario of feeling superior in putting others down. So one takes, for example, the position of identifying oneself, so identifying another as someone who's lower than oneself, and identifying oneself as identifying with someone who is lower, and having someone, just degrade, stepping in to degrading someone and feeling superior to that person, and just all pumped up and full of yourself and prideful. So this lets you feel what the negativity of an attitude of superiority. But this isn't real pride. This is not a negative mental state. This is not a non-virtue. This is like an exercise that you are undergoing for yourself. And in the same way, we could turn the tables, and so that to have competitiveness, so someone who is equal to oneself and feeling competitive. Again, it's not a negative mental attitude, but you are experiencing it through the lens of someone who's doing like an experiment to see just what it feels like to take on an attitude of superiority, just what it feels like to take on an attitude of being competitive and wanting what someone else has.
Sometimes that दूसरे तो जबलो है समलन जबलो है मतलब मी को न जबलो है यो मरवा दिया जिदा दे गोचु सोच
ला
जिदा दे तां गोचु सोच ला हा को दो है.
So again, the way what we're doing is we're stepping into someone else's mental thinking. We're not doing this to become like them. We're doing this to give ourselves a moment to experience what it's like to feel, superior and vain and prideful, or competitive or jealous. We are not looking to once again take this up, but we're just looking to take on their thinking in order to once again see the reason why it is unfavorable and a faulty. And so in the verses where we're at, this is a swap that we're making, and that's what's happening. So there's been a little bit of a different understanding here. We're exchanging our thinking for a little bit in order to identify the fault in it.
That's something nepa ta chatu tela thesumda namdo guni ke chugyo marla gor kanje pe ranchinjin susu masazune ranchinjin klape kyon thamu injin salage thapsi chere ingu that 태존은 만다 고사 셈 딩니 답에 네바네바체니 랑 수수 마사준 랑이 삼줄데 바기 젠레테 젠지 삼줄데 랑이 답에 당돌내야지 두승거래
아니
다디
네바네바스나
네바네바 스디갈라 수수 셈나 태존다 남다 균이 끼마주지니
올라서
니 베트게
야
다가르 주베 다 쳐바지 삼당 코르고 구하래
So this is a way for us to take on someone else's mental attitude, to step into that mental attitude. It is a method, it is a technique that if we can do this, that this will bring us to such certainty. We will be left without a doubt that whatever that negative mentality that we are meditating on is absolutely inappropriate. We will be left without a doubt. We will come to absolute certainty that self-cherishing is no good. And so this is really a very root method to come to certainty on this topic. When we enter kind of this role play or entering someone else's negative, mind state and looking at it.
Dina yatsar mujin disungdo chanju sebi semchen rangle membatan nyambatan rangle la paso miyul de chenes ta jenala rangle memba ranla nyamba rangle thoati de sumiyul de chenes vani jentu jenini chenes 다 많이 jen이 제네즈들라 대기니 빼자서 마사 중디가라 수수 란진디 공부 임바데 랑게 삼다 크리스케 삼다나 진저 랑게 삼다 랑게 삼다다 길랍 첨보데 쾌 삼다다 제디도 스타용도가라 답직오 미즈바시키기로 어다 디시고다 디베 진이진 va vajentu는 zembe le kosa Buenis, le samle cosa bogoraes gore. Samutang de cosa bogoraes. Neshitang, Tesumki Namdo maybe Semgisu, Rajan Jebagombe, Janjusebe, Legends, the Pujana, Janjusebata, Rajan Jeng and the Ming de la Legends and Mingtare. Tangazo tegi debit taimba. What a tenajita? What a dose, Chedigala Kanje? 다 세디갈라 냠낸 제바보티지 디 세디갈라 에니베 란친진 연댕에 야니 젠디 삼다야 다티 삼다야레 디 디날베 살부도 디 데웬날데 대전 대완딩이 디 세야데 직빠직냐레
라소
대완디 투딘 추기답에 숭 전주 대화 두치품산 생이들이 직빠직냥도 거니 다 이나양 라메 숭균 만다지 숭샤도 땡가서 양 주구 랍거라.
And so Geshe-la has consulted many of the commentaries, and they all concur. Although there are they're differently expressed, they all they're saying the same thing. And in one commentary, in particular, Gyaltsen Rinpoche?
Gyaltsen Rinpoche.
The one that so there's that's the large, the Dutse Punzang that he's holding up, that is a very large commentary, but there's another more concise commentary by Gyaltsab Rinpoche that really just concisely says exactly what we have been saying. So that there is you know, a bodhisattva, someone who has already taken up the altruistic intent for the purpose of training, one now meditates on three kinds of individuals. So you have yourself, oneself is a bodhisattva with altruistic attitude, now meditates in regards to another individual of either higher, lower, or equal standing. And think of those three, but take one for example, and now put yourself back in Chris's shoes. Remember, now you're Debbie, you're the one who is already a bodhisattva and altruistic, but Chris doesn't know anything about it. And Chris is just totally acting off of ego and acting off of self-cherishing. So now put yourself back in Chris's shoes, and how would Chris act towards someone that they meet, that they feel threatened by, who they feel is superior? Imagine yourself as Chris. Imagine all of the emotions that Chris is going to go through of feeling inferior next to this other. Then put yourself in Chris's shoes, and how would Chris feel about someone who is inferior? Chris would feel all kinds of superiority and feel great, and it's all about, you know, himself. And then how about someone of an equal? Well, there would be rivalry, there'd be competitiveness, there'd be jealousy, there'd be all kinds of things going on. So what you're doing is you're swapping, you're taking on a substitute mindset for a period of time just to experience it. And as Gyaltsen Rinpoche says now, when you do this, you will be left with no doubts as to the certainty that this is inappropriate, just as bodhisattvas such as Bodhisattva Lekchen has done. And so here, for that bodhisattva, the altruistic, you know, the person who has taken on altruistic intent, like our Debbie, here Gyaltsen Rinpoche uses the example of the bodhisattva Lekchen. And so again, we have this one individual who is acting in like these different paragraphs, these different verses. But although it is, again, this altruistic person but they're acting through another. So they're acting through the lens of someone who hasn't yet taken on an altruistic attitude. So that's what's happening in these verses. And so we've been trying to make that clear as we started talking about it last week. So is that more clear for people now? That's what we're doing.
Yang samtanji dai samtanji disungdo dewa ngar dewa yang dewa junjun dewa kaji nala ani daje manje kongi datla da ning pas samtang ranjin kongbu indegendela da ning pe samtang ani rajin je sarga dala da sarpachi ani sarpate ge ani pe ning pe samtang sa dela ani pe di kodruche yendegala ta kyun shibuch thongro oda te du sene yang kyun sansan chi sungwar te din din du ne khasan jimba jusan gyar moche ani du samdana sen pembu yong du ani kunna ma tenjin galsan te gera te pe yabodu te dig du se te rabundi junjun dewa dinala duwa oda gyar moche palcha junjun dewa te ngama lo na yin sare
Oh, las
samdan dusi dina tampe sarvudu oda dusi yang ko zawe tiji na jinji samma korna dusi ne ta ningpa de ge ngazu ngama ta tanda tosu jenjinjing yenden tong ngala ani maje kongi ran jinjin susu ngame samdan da kande jindu kyun chalena kyun thongro yang ran jinji kyun thongdo kanji ranjini kyun chalage tapshiri odu sujires.
So then in a few of the commentaries, the way it expresses what the trainings are looking at in these verses and what we're looking at, the way they explain it is we're making a distinction. So here we've spoken about, for example, Debbie and Chris. In some, and in particular, Geshe-la says there's a very brief commentary that's very clear on this, that takes the old I and the new I. The old I is the I that was full of all of the kinds of thoughts that will come from someone who is very strongly self-identified and self-cherishing and egotistic. So that's the old self. And then there is a new self, the self like Debbie, the new self that has already understood the fault in that kind of an attitude. And what's happening is the new self sees the faults in the old self, in the old way that they themselves used to think. And that's the way that you are looking at all of this. The new self is inserting themselves back into a situation of how the old self acted out and looking at that and identifying it as negative and wrong and so forth. And Geshe-la says, remember that he in his own commentary, Geshe-la's commentary, when he was explaining this to us, used the old and the new self example and stated that His Holiness had said that this was a very, that His Holiness had said, and Kunzang Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen had said that it was a very effective meditation to insert yourself into old destructive attitudes and relook at them. And so perhaps His Holiness the Dalai Lama had read about this technique in this very brief, concise commentary. Maybe he read it there. But in any event, that's what's happening in these root verses that we're looking at in the way of the Bodhisattva. It is the new self looking at the old attitude of the old self. And so, or like acting like that old self, and the new self looks at it and says, so how is that? You know, how is it when, you know, when this kind of former action and former thought was in play? How was it? Now we look at it from this new objective standpoint and look back and see how it was to be that old self. And it is sure that you will see, when you look at it like that, you will find fault in it, especially from looking at that from that objective viewpoint.
삼례라 방아주 중중이랑 걸어서 시작하되 아하 디디디저 덴디미도 삼삼지 연구도 어떻게 집지 약간 참은 진전에 살아야기 탑시다.
So we can see our faults when we look back, like from, you know, into the past, and look at our former actions, or as we call here the old self or the former self. And you know, looking at it like that, looking back, we can really see the faults in it. And just generally speaking, in this life that we live, in everyday life, we gain experience. We gain experience where we evolve through our experiences, and we come to a point in our life and we look back and we're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? You know, or aha, now I get it, now I see. And that's what experiences, you know, teach us. So now we're purposefully creating that experience to remember to look back at those old ways, really feel what it's like. And we can really and very subtly and very closely see, you know, very finally see all of the, you know, our past mistaken ways. And when we ourselves see it, you know, we identify it, and we see it ourselves. We honestly accept it, right? We straight on and then like, okay, I get it. You know, you honestly, you really, really see it. And then you become just very upstanding and very decent because you've really seen it. You've honestly owned it.
다이 라메 숭균 양 라메 숭균지 전주 니나 대화 침배나라 라메 숭균지 건도 니나라 네테제 로거와
Oh, lesson. So Geshe-la is going to read to us from another commentary.
다 리스품잔들이다.
Oh, okay.
주된 주기 답에 리스품잔아 셰파 숨 건도 왔다 셰파 숨바들이
Okay.
라메 숭균 셰파 곰베 감들 라메 숭균 가렌 딜터 중세스 mensodato 제바 소니 레페 다웨네수 라자 라즈네타 소수 유타데바 멤버데자 아니 진 토웨네수 라자네 다데 되게 지바레 다 홈겹디가라 에 가사 타도 홈디가라 다 고사페네디 삼당 타도 키루주 아니 홈데 톨 사디가라 아 디다 지금 말에 nga 정주 세바 냠는 적인지 근데 타도 홈 때니잖아 야부요 말에 삼삼잖아 양sem라베 뉴럴레게 답시지거레스 뭐다 텐디지나 양 초구에서 숨도 당보 소소페 유고 제루제네 아니 에 타도 끼루주 아니 끼루주는 타도 되게 끼네 딱 가르펜도도 nga 전주 세베 냠는 적인 전주 셈 냠는 적인 딘디지 딴 지금도 삼단도가라 텔링 교샤제지 응거로 두스네 타도다 엔덴셈다 나겔 순갈에 텐디제지도 어다 두스나 미초바요 마레스 가르제나 간제 란친진 느껴도 타야다 애니 젠친진 연된 뭐 공패도 너에게 탑시지리
And so in this Dutse Pumzang, or you could call it the vase of excellent nectar, the commentary, there are 3 different like sections on explaining this technique, and this is the 3rd. And so for example, so it says that the first thing that we do is we visualize or bring to mind an individual. And in this case, because we're looking to elicit and arouse feelings of jealousy, this would be someone of gain or fame or someone that we feel is superior or higher. So bring them to mind. And then you want to elicit feelings of jealousy. Think about that, individual that you're jealous of, and purposefully arouse feelings of strong jealousy towards that person. Really feel jealous as you can. Then afterwards, so meditate on that really clearly and strongly. And after that, feel that afflictive emotion. And remember, we had really looked to elicit it. Really feel jealousy. Feel it clearly and strongly to your bones. And so then you think about that jealousy that you just aroused towards someone. So what good does it do me? Think, what good does it do for me? I'm a Bodhisattva. I am practicing to be more kind, to be more altruistic and more caring. What good does that jealousy, what good does it bring me? What good does it do me? And it's the same thing when it would come for, competition, feeling competitive or rivalrous towards someone. So it's not disallowed to feel like, and then the commentary says, so also it's the same for competitiveness and the like, meaning to arouse different emotional reactions, is not just disallowed. And what is the reason that it's not disallowed? It's because the reason that we're doing it is it's a technique. It's a technique to once again will guide us back to the benefits and qualities of being altruistic and pointing out the faults of being egotistic and selfish and self-cherishing.
디순도양 타도 곰바 나결 곰바지 녀무 민기타네 땡양스 란친징기 냠페 캐버징기 인기 방지 초수 또바니 마이너스 녀무이나 방자인 거로와 디 방지 초수 또바 말에 녀무 민기타네 템바르 마도 디페 방지 초도 말에 니에네페 란친징 견자게 탑시지레 승무도와 페 미스베 침도와 맞으디 간지 타토지 렌셈지 디치디가라 홉데가라 미기 뉴몬초데 요에게 삼로지 코르고라 데다 덴자와니는 말에 간지 마겔시디 포파달라 그상 공동 로선 준디 갑둘라 포팔라니 베 마겔기 민기타네 와다 디존지리 쟁기엔된 통다 땡아 톱나 지마윤디 땡아 톱나 냠바 지 삼로지 코르고라 데라니 나겔기 민타레 다 나겔 마레 와다 두스레 다디 제체네 용거레 다디 간지 예버시베나 고트링 통용거라
젠세네
마레 예제 인갈라 트론 토슨 살루두고로 아스파
올라서
다단 노르텐데 갑달라페 오는체네 페미시베 자위 치진 나진체나 나마 당봉데시 개비가듯이 데니 가자 유지게 왕도잖아 아니 배자 닝바다 서파지는 삼당야지 데마이메 양냐는 가라 내 민부지나 당부 타도 기주네 아니 배 타도들 견듯하네 아 데니 게심지야지 간지 담가다마서 숨도 강대연에 지기래도
라
담가마서 숨도 가시
담카숨 카리네
남가 숨도 자위 티진 나진지네 라진 제네 삼륜 집을로는 제지제 다 닝바다 란진지 kumbuime 다들라 다 사바트게 견듯하네 양 란진진 현타야지제 아니 수소 곰갸 타도 끼루주 타도 끼사네 나장주 세배 냠는 적인지 덴데 타도 끼나 깔라디 선데 아니 타도들 견듯하네야 겨심제 제네네 디가네 란진진기 간지 견두고 와라 이 냠는 또 디카르전 디순가 카르전에 개버기니요 말해서 숭도 수술로 강 밥대요 지기리
And so here, for example, and later also it goes into more extensive detail, for example, and really clarifying some of this. But here, for example, jealousy and pride at this point, it's about clarifying this, shining the spotlight on these tendencies and on these reactions that we have. At this point, we're not speaking about them like, they are, so we're not eliciting them as an afflictive emotion that needs to be abandoned. We're eliciting them so that we can identify them, point them out as faulty. And this is really important. We're not looking to arouse an afflicted mind. That's not, something that we've been trying to abandon. That's not the point. What we're doing is we're looking to elicit something to identify as faulty. And when it talks about being, for example, gaining great qualities, wouldn't it be great, if we were to gain great qualities? This this isn't pride, so to speak, like a faulty pride. We spoke about this at the point when we were speaking about diligence. but there's a kind of a confident way of going about things, of being very brave and being, you know, confident and diligent. This is a, you know, this is more of a quality. This isn't like a prideful, like a faulty pride. And so, you know, later on, you know, these things are also clarified. But what's important for us to know here is that before we enter into this section of the root verses that we're reading, that there must be an explanation of behind these. We must have some background and some commentary and some explanation to know how to interpret what's being said here on the page. Because if we don't identify that there is a new self, like the new self and the old self, one that is purposely feeling rivalry and competitiveness, and only to point out the faults in those, then it could be confusing. So we are, you know, if not, we will be completely confused, because here we are purposefully arousing jealousy. But then again, not only are we purposefully developing jealousy, then we are pointing out the fault in it, and then we are feeling regret for this, you know, when we do have, for example, a jealous mind. So there are a few different stages that are happening within these verses. So we are putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. And then we are purposefully generating a feeling, for example, of jealousy. And then we are pointing out the fault in the jealousy, identifying it, and then pointing out a fault, and then feeling regretful about jealous feelings. And as a bodhisattva, and then coming from the point of, I am a bodhisattva, this is a faulty mental state, and one that one should, you know, one should regret. And the reason we're going through these stages and these steps is simply for it to dawn on us, for it to have that aha moment, and for it to really dawn very clearly. So if we understand it like this and go through the steps like this as we're reading these, now the meaning of what we're doing has become clear. Is that right for people? Is it becoming more clear what we're doing? And so also what's happening here is as we meditate in this way, taking the, you know, stepping into the shoes of others and so forth, it's a method to decrease self-cherishing, and another way also to be highlighting the qualities in others. So we're really pointing out, you know, the qualities in others as well, to make sure we're looking at increasing our focus on the qualities in others and decreasing the focus on selfishness and self-caring. So maybe we take a 5 or 10 minute break here, everyone. So anyways, I was talking with Geshe-la on the break, because Geshe-la had commented that maybe it's been difficult because we've you know, spent a lot of time on this, but I commented that although we spent a lot of time, it's become clear, and so actually that will just make it easier, not harder. And he laughed and he agreed and reminded us that Shantideva himself said elsewhere here in the text that, you know, there's nothing that will not become easier if you become familiar with it. And so Geshe-la says that he also really appreciates, these questions. And actually he likes debating points. He says he really enjoys it. So he really enjoys debating the points. The more questions, the better. The more questions and the more debating, the clearer it becomes for people. And, I had said, I asked a question, last week, and it seems like it, might have, started like kind of like a long discussion. And he said, no, that actually he's glad. And he welcomes those questions. And, going on into the future, he welcomes questions. He says discussion is very, very good. Don't forget that there is, and I said that his point of life's experience brings us to a new place where we can look back and see our past mistakes more clearly. And he reminded us of something that he said before, is there is a knowing that comes from learning something, the knowing that comes from then later self-reflection and contemplation. And then there is a knowing that comes from meditation. And in meditation, we have kind of two kinds of, so when we really immerse ourselves in it, there's a meditation that comes with effort, and there's a meditation that has its own momentum. You're just deeply meditating and you get insights in meditation. So there are insights that come when we learn, but then we have to think about it and get those insights, and then we need to get the insights that come through the experience of meditation. And so it evolves, our understanding of something evolves, and we get all these kinds of insights. And so he says he welcomes questions. Please always feel free to ask them, because discussions are good. And, this is a text that as we come to, for example, the next chapter has many points that are going to need, because I told Geshe-la, I said, without the commentary on understanding verses 140 to 150 something here, it would be hard to really know what's going on. And he said this absolutely. And the same, and he does, he does the best he can, but, also he can make mistakes. He's not yet, he says, a perfect being. And so he's still an ordinary being and will, make, mistakes. He can make mistakes. We can all make mistakes. So, but also when we come to the next chapter, there's going to be more points like this that are going to need background and information and explanation. And it's not important that we go far in the text, that we make a lot of progress through a lot of verses. But what is important, especially going forward, like in the wisdom chapter, for example, is that there's a clear understanding. The clear understanding is not important. It's not how fast you go through them.
서서 너가요 말에 너시 그래 그 저거게요 주스요라 그 들은 수소 현상잖아 야거라.
So if we make mistakes, the important thing is that we go through and fix them, that we repair them, fix those mistakes. So as it said, if one makes a mistake and then fixes it, it's not a mistake. It's when one makes a mistake and doesn't repair it and fix it, then it remains a mistake. So what's important is that we go through as we err, that we then make it right.
주스 맥겨지는 덴바인기를 덴바 차그를 덴니고 좀그렇게 와요 말아. 네 라바데 주스 맥겨지는 덴바 차버려 덴바라고 덴바란 차그로 와.
그냥 수치갑나?
네 랍겨들 주스 좀그렇게 맥겨지나 덴바 차버려 와.
네네네.
덴바라 좀그렇게 와요 말아 와.
Kailang di pena neutral chena dene sucha magyabna?
또 조금 야나들 배 견지 못 잡으러.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
재산
so
견대 배 견산 제대 배 미스부 개침 버렸다.
and so it's when, when we make a mistake and then we fix it, then it is brought to the truth. It's brought right. But if we don't fix something, so anyways, if we fix a mistake, then it's brought right. We bring it to the truth. But if we don't fix something, it's left in the state of a mistake, of something that's not true or not right. And that's when it's a fault. That's when there's a problem.
다 계산되니만 로고스로와. 다까지 가르사다 냠발은 전선 공부야들이. 니빠 냠발은 전선 공부야스다다. 와진 제 상인 간사지기 다코배 또바 냠바텐데 전선 공부야라다. sabji jidwa nyengur side mingdang tekpadang tachi choa yuje tesu kanga yongurwa nyengur landen sam goya yenden landen sam goya lepi namdang jen landen sam goya nopala jawala gawa kyawasi chanji saba indida suso nopala jari na pe ngazu na miji kyonjine nopala jarna dungan chigro chanji saba nopala jari na tarumpe ti kyon thondu gala gawa chigore oda tendi jini kanche sabji jitam do shibuke chembori tegede
la so di tampo dan shipa di sepodo nipa di nyengor di sepodo nipa
yenden da tapala demba
ola so
ne sumba lekpi namdang jenlan demba lekbi namdang yende maimba namdang jendala ene be jendurche ya
and then shipa di nipa
nipa la jarwala gawa ke was
And so next, so now we'll return back to the text where we left off, where we will be looking into the practices in regards to working with a mind of competitiveness or rivalry. So it is this, the person who, so for an individual who has already exchanged their self-cherishing with cherishing others, now they will be like meditating in a way to investigate, look back into feelings of competitiveness. And we look at feelings of competitiveness in 4 different categories. So over these 4 categories, we look into like arousing feelings of competitiveness towards those who have respect and gain, who are kind of well revered and maybe have means and gain. And secondly, those who have great qualities or are famous. And third, those that have other good, like numerous good qualities. And then fourth, those that, yeah, the fourth one is not clear. Di nerpa di shipa di nerpa ani kare chene
nopala tai chanju se jengi ta jentende nopala jarina pus kyong tangena te la gawake gore.
And then looking at an attitude of someone who feels happy about when bodhisattvas or others that are revered have harm come to them. And so we look at these, generating feelings in regards to these 4 different situations. And so, for example, regarding that fourth, when, someone who has a strong sense of identification, someone harms them, they're going to get upset. They're going to get reactive. Somebody hurt me. Look what you just did to me. But a bodhisattva wouldn't do that. A bodhisattva would be patient and would really just kind of take it on the path of practice. But someone who is full of self-cherishing would get very reactive in that situation.
Nyingul ndembati deta sholoka kare yadang tuchu jipchu jeptumbade.
That's all. So we're picking up at verse 147.
Vadang nyamla tenani kangi rangi lakchichir. Adaki nyetang kurtini zepai injang nepertuus. Da sideta da nyan chanju sebarang nyanin chenge ani da lajin tabu lajin nada dipidi nada chanju sebar rajing jenen be nyanin chenge the semjenda ridan tendegi la soba da kazuji na chan tene minye pada yenden sokandi chitona chanju sebarangi Nepatang kurti Nepazanita mazo Peshaina Gumupurwa. Any kurti sitigala migi kukrujum chasa chick consume grimtia the ticket yungura kurti sitigala Majuchan Sumbit yungura Lugi. What that? The Super Yang any digital another thing about the troop. Two grace. Tako intensem jidigala yung nepardo te mi kenji tsugu na te ngapardo tu chikorwa. Wata tindi yung grace. Tandi randa ane da pagi tagi nyamba sidigala ta ranjin jepe ane samleyoken chanju sem Randa topa nyambaji lai dengue tsugorwa. Otatere. Nyingurla. Tako pe konral nyingur tordingerta marde jengitonla de nyingur tsoya yongurwa.
La.
Rala nyingur tondingerta marde jengitonla nyingurla tsoya yongurwa. Chanju sebala.
Oh, re.
Jengitondo.
Dene jangchub sempa jengi chadu.
Oh, jengi chendu nyingurla tsoya tene yongurwa. 아니 그배 원기서 봐 연구 저거에 자기로와 그 인서 연구로 어떻게 단다디 란친지 인견 달래인데 그배 원기 저거로
And so now in verse number 147, which reads, that I might excel, outstripping him regarded as my peer and equal. In contest, I will certainly secure my fame and fortune, my public renown. And so now this, that I might excel, this I is the Bodhisattva. It is the I that has the altruistic intent. We could call it Debbie. We could call it the Bodhisattva. In any event, it is one that has already exchanged an egotistic attitude for a self-cherishing, an other cherishing and caring, an altruistic attitude. So now there is the, bringing up this feeling of how you would feel. So the other now is someone that has, for example, is wealthy, someone that has a lot of money, or perhaps they have, wealth and material possessions. Secondly, they are worthy of respect of others. And so what kind of feelings would that instigate? That would bring up feelings. Okay, so this is an equal, someone that is on, your status level. So someone that is equal. And so someone like this would instigate in someone else feelings of competition. You know, or someone like this would have a feeling of pride. So now here, I will absolutely, the feeling that, you know, one looks to arouse is a feeling like, I absolutely must accomplish this wealth, this position, this respect of others. And one really, you know, looks to feel like that's something that they want to gain. As it says here, I will certainly secure my fame and fortune and public renown. And so this is how someone who would feel if they hadn't already exchanged, you know, themselves with a new attitude. What would a bodhisattva feel? You know, a bodhisattva wouldn't feel like that. A bodhisattva, you know, would feel, you know, perfectly fine that others had, you know, this. They would be worthy of it. They would be, you know, grateful someone else had it. But someone who's in a self-cherishing attitude, you know, would feel despondent if someone else had more than they did.
연된다 tekpalan den baasi ta chanchu sebe tuyu 연된다 아니 민라 렌dur 째드레 다티 가라 진에 다키 연된니 지tin 굴라 살와탄시 제안디 연된강 디 시디갈라 젠 chanchu seba 연된강 수경 통을 민주자시 다 chanchu seba 그런 답에 다진 젠댕인데 제마타 인자 이 연된데 답에 chanchu seba 젠달 타는 유인마다 요마라 보다 티 인디갈라 배 유인인데 곧 살포레스 고 연된 가서 지어봐대 나게 연된데 가서 지어봐대 살포레스 chanchu seba 제 젠스데 chanchu seba 배 서통불 내비 chanchu seba 때 연된데 배 학과야 그러나 요 말했어 아니 같이 갱 chanchu seba 때 연된 처부터 갱 경원도서 되게 시금에서 숨도와 지구 숨는데가 때가 조야메가 타메겐 조야메겐 숨는도와 다들 되니들가 된디게 답에 공미 연된다 아니베 나 톰내냐 봤다 된디 용거다 그 연된는 댄스들가 된디지래 아니 대가나지 민당 대 민란데야래
And so here and you know what, do we have, before I go into 148, do we have any other, of 147, do we have any other versions of 147? I know sometimes Laura and Janice, you have, or Doug.
They're in the chat.
If someone would read them, it would be good, do you think, for like the recording? If you don't mind.
Can I go ahead, Laura, with one?
Okay. My version says, this Bodhisattva is regarded as my equal, but so that I might outshine him, I will acquire wealth and reputation and defeat him in debate.
Was that 147 or 148?
147.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yep, that's
okay.
right.
Okay.
In order that I may excel, he who is regarded as equal with me, I shall definitely strive to attain material gain and honor myself, even by such means as verbal dispute.
Okay, thank you. And now we have verse number 148. And in 148, it reads, by every means I'll advertise my gifts to all the world, ensuring that his qualities remain ignored by everyone. And so for, you know, someone who is still in the self, you know, cherishing and competitive mode, then they're going to be very verbal about, you know, all that they have, and, you know, be boastful and try to make it look very good. And this this verse, by the way, is in terms of being competitive when it comes to someone else having quality or fame and renown. And, for the one who is competitive with someone in terms of their quality of fame and renown, they look to make themselves very outwardly to really be something, to really be someone, as it said, really advertising their gifts. Whereas a bodhisattva, or, someone who is out of this kind of egotistical mind, actually, they're very humble. And they say, actually, they don't have the qualities that they actually do have. They don't talk at all about them. So someone who is in a still in self-cherishing mode, the few qualities they have will be very evident. You will be able, they wear it on their sleeves, so to speak, and advertise them. Where bodhisattvas and those who are beyond that are actually very humble. And even if you ask them if they know something, they will say that they don't know it, that they don't have those qualities. And so it says here that his, meaning that bodhisattva qualities remain unknown, ignored by everyone. And other translations for 148?
I will proclaim my own good qualities to the whole world by whatever means I can, but I will make sure that no one ever hears of any good qualities he might possess.
By all means, I shall make clear to the entire world all the good qualities I have, but I shall not let anyone hear of any good qualities he may have.
딱 말한소이나 가르쳐 그래. 소소 강요 받으 뉴뉴마데 시기면에 시부시게 연락으로. 아니 전주 서버에서 던데 재미도. 란라 연대 요한테 배. 아니 진 연대들 쟁득도. 연 참보지르디 배. 란 진진 대당 진 진진 얘기 연대네 개발 전부도 와. 어떻게
So the different attributes of what occurs, whether one is coming from a very strong self-centered attitude in contrast to a caring for others and altruistic attitude, the difference is really, so big. There's really such a tremendous difference. Someone with great self-cherishing, although they have few qualities, they magnify them and they say they have many, while in actuality they have few. Where in actuality, bodhisattvas hold amazing qualities, but they keep them hidden, and they rather uplift the qualities in others, and they highlight the qualities in others. And so the difference in the mode of operandi here is really, you can see, is quite distinct.
So 두사다 투성은 란진진 두고하래. 란진진 여긴데 딱 같이 맨에다 그 정구도 마서나 동바이나 두고요 가르에 차에 돈달라.
아니 야보고 좀 마서한테라 계시.
맞아 정구들 잠벌루사지어와. 잠벌루사.
알아서.
정구들은 다도 그만 잠벌루 그도 부부다나 닌데 또 가르에 차거와 망부도 땡에요 말아.
알았어.
아, 전주 서바트서 된디 균치가 말다. 바 얘네 맨도노제 아니베 젠진진 시부 제젠라 베 간소지 젠라 아니 펜타고도 간소지 젠라 에 펜버투 투도 텔타그마다 수수이 연데 모소 땅엔 균용고 말아. 티 젠진진기 연된데 다때 젠진진인데 시부지 개 첨부도 왕아서 오늘 아니 젠진진 슈 정보 젠데간데 아니 배 수수 류 두자이나 야가 타 고르주나 야가 여러서 숨도 여름 숨도
건다 루 죽추 건다
류기 두자 죽골라 내나 자용아 셈기바 Teni umgres sungda.
No so.
Gyarmuji kutsitala ni pe payulshor pe kale mambo nyaso de gyarmuji tu ma ki bchin chung ma sungda. Dijin chin katin rawa.
Yeah.
Niji sing de shwosh ke tsa chambarta. Yundo nga so niji yana yanto samtang de pe misro ke chambare.
So what this all comes down to, really, what does this all point to? The difference really points to it really comes down to an attitude of, is this just all about me, or is this all about someone else? When it's all about me, for example, as we say, it's like, throwing sampa into the bowl, so the one who's saying, I have this quality, I have that quality, nothing ends up staying in the bowl, and then there's this white, dust all around it. And, they keep saying, I have this quality, I have that quality, tossing this and tossing that. Whereas the Bodhisattva that really holds the qualities, very, very, understated about it. This is completely under the radar. Although they have it, they act as if they don't. But what we can see in the focus of a Bodhisattva, someone who really has taken up an altruistic intent, is we can see that their only focus and their only care is in benefiting others. That is their focus. That is what it comes down to, and we can see it in their attitude. And because when someone is altruistic, their focus just remains in one place. Their focus remains on others. When someone has such strong caring and focus in regards to doing for others, that they can, it's their body is in service to others. Their body is in constant service to others, and they are happy about it. They are peaceful and happy, and they are in constant service to others, that they never tire of it. They never tire. As a matter of fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a perfect example of this. He is in constant service to others. He is always doing something, to help others. He's constantly working to help others, and yet he says he's never tired. And he is in great health and is constantly happy. And what is the reason for this? The reason for this is altruism. It's great compassion. And this is an important point. And that is why compassion is so precious. It just allows, compassion and altruism allow us to tirelessly work for the benefit of others. And that's why Geshe-la says that he asks us to always, always, always remember compassion.
Ngunche lame namthar lab. Ngunche susu tepachise lamage zepatile kade jikyangidu. Tenajin chinchin dulji nyamlenzere. Tenajin jebanrona nyamlengoma chagorta. Gawarmbacha kade jinzegidu. Tenajin jing aranto jinju inza tele tepachigore, mepachigore, ichichigore. Ichiche najinji lamen zebanze de najinji susu nyamlen chigwade pe misibne chimachadiore. Jelen no pekele ke tapshi gunna ke mido yarmuji tane gemila be no pekele draina dala no pekele ke tapshi nang mido trodia tapshi nang mido oda tagana jing anzo ina tana susule ne kingina dola zesemchi eni pe ne makeje pa eni ne pe nele makede pe zambegoni pri zambegoni pa jabdo duyaji Sometimes, Kalakala, Susan, man charwood.
Kale.
Susugone, Pazan, Susu Napachigina, tell us Zampugone, Pajabdo Juina, dancing in the Kule Megan Charwood, Union, Damagan Charwood. chinda no ba kengi
Men. Mm-hmm.
no ba kengin susulan da jengin megen chadu gres me chadu gre
Oh, mevacha. Oh, lasso. Oh, me. Oh, lasso. Yeah. And so Geshe-la says that actually again and again we should look to the life stories of these great past lamas and practitioners, our past gurus, and really look at the example of their enlightened activities and look at the examples of the practice, their practice. And for example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is an excellent example. We can look at the very way that he lives his life, his enlightened activity, and his practices. And we should remember that we are the followers of these lamas. We are the followers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so we should look at his example and have great aspiration to follow after his enlightened activities, his practices, his compassion, aspire to be like him and like these great past practitioners. And we should have trust and we should have faith and we should go forth in a way that our own actions and our own practice follows after the way they have shown us. For example, we look at the activities of the Dalai Lama. Does the Dalai Lama ever act out in a malicious way? Does he ever look to hurt others? No, as a matter of fact, that even if the Dalai Lama has enemies, those that don't agree with him, he looks to benefit them. He looks to be a friend for them. And if we ourselves, for example, in our own life and our own experience, have those that don't like us or that even wish to cause us harm or even cause us harm, we in return should not cause harm, but look to help them actually and really, act well towards them, act in a very decent and kind manner. And actually, as they give us harm, in return, we give goodness. They may continue to try to give us harm, and we repay that with goodness. And after a while, actually, they won't be enemies anymore. We will have kind of transformed this so that they are no longer enemies.
Yeah, that sumpa de lepinam namra and embassi ta that kim pancha jings that ni chungin dila means that nepa lengi that ni kungin dila means sungda tak big karzana ta simjen da kyun kan yo ta nyamlin chepa buina da te kyun kan yo de ani pe pangures panjares salwar chepores salwar ze meozoya ani simjing jengi chopar ki bai ejins dila e tetar chepa ta rani chungir dila minze da susu ta une jengi chopar ki bai mares de ta susu mensa zunguare menjins ani va zekola soba le prngeching chuna ta le prngechi yabu rana yabore jengi kubr ki bandine ta pe yan ji karso zekola soba jengi kuria ke tondala celea tantendi chogo mariang kwata tisungore kuruar kubandilani teta njua minos tamone chanchu sebe nyamne singde yam sambuji doa
Di Korla Youngher Joshekuna
다 수수이 경이 교도 강갑 애니베 경기 초 가리나 지경이나나 당하게 경이나나 루기 경이네 견데 되게 강갑 방어자바레스 매아조거레 셀구그레스 셀즈도 매아즈조야
So di
경기리데
di nga di pena di kyun denso nga begore.
마이 베마레
Ma.
균스 다 셀버체네 매아조그레스
Lasso.
빵자지는 빵어자레스 빵자
Lasso. Di bacha.
다디 탑생이 온 거래 다 겁도 고바지 또 뉴스 견데도 파기 빵어자가 직차거와 견데 아니베 마베나 쟁기양 띠견데 통나 쟁기 디조나 텔라양 견베고라 갑돌래양 쟁기 견도 통해지 텔레페 세메주야 텐디 용나 디 베고라 텐디 갑돌라 지나 견데 견칸요데 살월제 빵월자 셀월제데 메아세야
Yang di kapla geshla kande chikla di duto dilla ngatso di pena di nyomong ani keru tap marbe tangpo ngatso pena di drensem komya tang
디 nyumongone 말해대
di hakosong yana yang di nangla nge kyun di ngatso di begore nge kyun begore nga pena di kotri dang erpa chagore nga chagore kong chagomare nga chagore
맞다 니용으로 고바 니용으로 와
laso
사회 고바 nyumong당 균리데 살월제리스 직
laso
균데 파조데라 균데 통이나 파조데라 로사케 되니나 되나 베고야 베고야 마베나 파조 너참 디 균데 통이나 파조 너참 체용으로 와
really
디 니용을 간지 자기 균양 빵자 인식도 빵월 자기 균 가르유다 빵월 자와레 셀버 자와레스 그러 그 균진의 마셀나 균데 망로 통용 거라 그 펠용 거라
laso
다니 충길 딜라 민스 다니 소소 미 쟁기 초벌어 받았더니 지금 말해대 이나 가서 오래 다 딘디기 집 가서 오래 딱 렌사데 소소단 도든 냠바지로 딘디가라 집코 파조데 라토스 디인데라 소소에 테나진지 찍고 가래 남바든 렘베 남바르지 레데 ngo네잖아 차요 말해
laso
아니 덱바지 아니 제고라 소파테데 직 토스 가르소레 제고단 제단 고엘라 소파 페 렉프레 야가지 녜기 탑시 와다 구르안 주와 딜라니 대단 좋아 미노스 아니 또디 갑두들라 텐디체르마도 페 풀라니 페 코 민용야 딱바요 미싱기 구부전도다 디셀기오 마레라 바레
And so here in verse number 149, where we are like recalling the good, like speaking about good qualities, recalling the good qualities, it reads, "My faults I will conceal, dissimulate, for I, not he, will be the object of devotion. I, not he, will gain possessions and renown. I will be the center of attention." And so when we meet with someone on equal stature, you know, there are two ways to look at this, two things to think about. When we see qualities in someone else, the reaction of, you know, kind of the afflicted reaction is to want to hide one's own faults in order to make yourself look more elevated than you are. Whereas faults are actually, Geshe-la says, it says here to conceal. He said that actually, you know, the way to understand it is to, you know, that actually these faults need to be purified. They need to be cleared away. We need to be rid of these faults. These are something to abandon. But what one would look to do if one was feeling like threatened by someone with qualities, higher like qualities, would be to want to hide their faults, like not disclose their faults, as it says here. Do we have anyone else, other translations for 149?
I will hide my own faults, but make his known. I will be venerated by others, but ensure that he is not. I will acquire a great deal of material wealth and encourage others to honor me, but not him.
Also, I shall hide all my faults. I will be venerated, but not he. I will find a great deal of material gain. I will be honored, but he shall not.
Okay, so those all match up.
데레다 쟁기 창루바다 젠레니 수수견데 통네 쟁기 이젠라 때는 전부이거나 대갑라 배고야다. 근데 용거래. 이 용거래. 이 가지고 봐 타긴 로야 되다.
Yeah, so if, you know, when seeing, you know, when identifying faults that, you know, so this other would identify faults that they have, and the natural tendency would be to hide the faults, you know, to not disclose them, or to kind of keep them hidden.
제가 맞을 때 truth스디가라 장보스디가라 강갈 납셔도 그렇게도라 또 파절은 내나 때 장보내나 니고 말아. 가자까지 신나 가자고 발타기 파절라고 내기도 민도 시 껴겨 이제 되라 준라고 말아 준스디가라 연대 군이라네 아님데 연대 군이라네 건 섬전에 아님데 시 교불라 있는 때에 갸순 차고래 장불라나 파절은 내나 전주습에 납자단 갈거래 양때 니고 말아 디고 디디가라니 빼 수지 니나 장불라 보여지나 백외 용거래.
And so when, you know, in terms also of concealment and being honest and truthful, if one were to say honest words, so if one were to, that's Yapokosuma-song.
배나 장부 세야 들어와. 맞으냐? 시 장부 좀 때들 그유 말해서와. 시 장부에나 파절은 넣나? 전주습에 납자단 걸거래스. 당아서 대바 준비 주의주간 전주습에 납자 또 적인지기 가자다 고발 타긴 로거래. 아니 곧 시대 장불라는 파 누구야나 또서 벤치데 껴껴들라네 파 민노에게 답시죠 거래.
라서.
맞아 코 고르다에 너밖에 말아.
라서. 야.
시교나 준 말해. 준 시엔데라 연도 군나라는 고르다에 그 군나라네 아니 시교결은 텔 준차 거래.
라서. 야.
그배운 그 또서 lemba 껴 잡아래. 이 좀 되는 돌아요네. 오빠 찡긴도. lembigun zerdiyore.
And so a word here on like honesties and either concealing something or being open with something. Even if one were to speak like the truth, words that were very true, but it would be hurtful to someone. This is not a route that a bodhisattva would take. A bodhisattva wouldn't stick to, oh, I need to say the exact, like, truthful words, no matter what, because it's the truth is the truth. If it's going to hurt someone, you know, this would be in opposition to the vows of a bodhisattva. And so as practitioners of the great vehicle, then one would choose words or choose to speak in a way that wouldn't bring the hurt to someone else. So they would be kind of maybe by omission of some of that information, they would speak in that way, but they wouldn't just say the truth because the truth is the truth and it would hurt someone, but rather they would speak kind of in a roundabout way. And this isn't to cause trickery or to cheat someone, you know, so, you know, this is just to speak about something in a way that won't bring hurt to someone else. There's another thing called lying, which is out and out, you know, saying something that one knows is not true, and speaking something. But when we like don't conceal the fullness of something or leave something out with omission because it is a way someone that can hear something that won't be hurtful to them, then this is the way that a bodhisattva would go about. Someone who, you know, someone who is really has the other's concern in their mind. And actually the Buddha has spoken about this in a couple of the sutras. The Buddha himself has spoken about this in the sutras.
다음에 순간데 좀 된 대로 와.
Dakme.
다음에 순간데 좀 된 대로데 좀 된 대로 가가 나한테 면도야래. 공공안에 굴고 와보는 가사 고어서데. 이마서는 제도 저인 두자데 아니베 양 따단 대고 말해. 아니 파다만이 세자오들 소리. 이 온바쟁긴 도로마다 dem군쟁긴 도로마다데 시 장부 말해. 세세니로 원에 아니 파마세 거래서 소리. 셀렌시바니로 원에.
세당 세바.
세바다 렘바니.
세바당 렘바.
주바 세바다 구바 렘바니로 원에 띵이 빵거래서 해야 되라. 파마니 세 거래서 숨자래. 어때 되니 좀 됐는데 나는 되니 가로야래.
And so so even the Buddha himself at two different times, at one time the Buddha proclaimed selflessness, that there is no self, the lack of a self. And at another time the Buddha gave teachings on the existence of the individual. So at one point he said the self does not exist, and then at another point he spoke about the existence of the individual. And the reason for this is because there were, you know, the audience was different. And so the Buddha said what needed to be heard at the time, taking into full consideration those that he was speaking to, the students that he was speaking to, the disciples. And at another time, the Buddha spoke, you know, in the sutra, spoke and said that you must kill both your mother and your father. And so what the Buddha meant, I mean, this was, you know, a provisional teaching. What the Buddha was speaking about here was that the craving, like we have the 12 links of interdependence, and there are 2 of the links that are craving and becoming. And when Buddha said you must kill them both, kill your mother, kill your father, what he was speaking about was to sever the links of craving and becoming. And so it seems, so the Buddha says what needs to be said in order for the benefit of the audience that's hearing them. And also then there are provisional teachings that need to be interpreted.
Nopal jarwa gawake wa de tere di jipa de ta din maru chepala yurin dani gavel ta roa kunji jegeta panjume bada tu cha ze sungdo ta te karzana ta vajen nyamnin chegin chanju seba lachin tabuinanda ta Deputy Nanda, Sui Nanda, that the name checking Chanchu Savaji in Chinchilla Susula Marua and Matsamba. Any Lapper checking Tini Yona Susu and Nipe Misigi. Gavinis ures, Karzanati teaching Tigni Zuba cake, Zuba Gomia Dantini, Tapsi Ungorwa. Ta Rueton Jekajin and Pansungi, Kunjupe, Mebadado, Rajanjan, Zing Tupi, Yundingi Lumba Gaparcha, Osita, Yan Samsamla, any Jengi, Majuchi, Zeng, Chijigala, Yansu, Kemba living Ageliora. Did you ant Kemba to the child, Tendichin, Tendicha, Tendi Unguris, Tendi Nigala, and Kanji, Gachaco Baltagil, Tagin, Miss Vacation Bores, Sungore. But Changes of Mone, Carsore. Dala, the Julopen Tagoti, Chanju Sivita, Zobagumdi, Top Pena Karsa. Mark Varanasi, and Transforma, Transopama Sindi, Labache de Cussins, the Transopama ins. Compachet Yan Labache the Cussins, the Transopama in Lagore. And it Tamal by Kala Shigache the Transopama in Lagore. What a tenich Zupas Gumdigala, Karsore, Tap Misamba Guni Kigo Marta, Zubi part of the Chinsona.
So the Varanasi ki pay courage ani Chona.
Varanasi ki Jumia the Varanasi Jore, Chumden the Jalju Kabla.
Lasso.
Transopama was in the Varanasi Pagi, Varanasi, Nepe, Gumjan, can Japo, Liran to the Gala, or the Tenditu, Tendichure.
No, so dene Sange Chumjende, dene Galpoto.
Otai
Anda, Yapoko Sumaso.
Transopama was the Yorwa.
Zobumawa di Rick.
Kung Chanju Sevari the Yorwa, Zopagumge. Lapachetigala, ko Swin City, Yaviti Tigala, Transopama in Lagore.
Oh, Lasso.
Compachena Zopama in Lagor, Kuntukigo Mare.
Lasso.
But Chesan Chanju Seva singing the Dratching in the Zupiloban time to Gala, Kuntuki, she's a making Chagorwa. Chesan Tin Dugala 가르쳐 거래. 맞아. 너빨리 제로 가와키야세 따다 용구도 장주 세바싱인데. 당 가서 레라버제다 용구 말데 깔레 이 삼다나 주고 저섬 치르치르로야 계속해 한번 용 거다.
And now we have verse number 150, where we're working with our reaction to others that might be harm doers, that bringing us harm, and almost kind of like being very patient or willingly taking on harm. And so what verse number 150 says, I will take such satisfaction in his evil deeds and degradation. I will render him despicable, the butt and laughing stock of everyone. In here, so meaning, I will become the butt and laughing stock of everyone willingly. So the meaning here is that when there is degradation or hurt, a bodhisattva, being it bodhisattva lekchen or putting ourselves in Debbie's place, whoever it is, to those bodhisattvas that are practicing, when others really, trigger them, what they will do rather than react is to forbear, to really generate an extremely patient state of mind. It actually gives them an opportunity to work on their patience. And remember, we're working on patience all the way through till we gain the perfection of patience. And so this is something that we work on at this time. And so there was also a story of back in the time of the Buddha, of one that was practicing, meditating and practicing and working on their patience. And whoever that would come to them and come before them and present them some kind of situation, they would just put their hands together and be patient with them and say, I am patient with this and I am patient with that, patient with everything that came in front of them. Because as bodhisattvas practice patience, they have to practice patience with difficult, situations that befall them, enemies and difficulties and the like. And Geshe-la says it's not always easy. As we ourselves practice with patience, we're going to be met with situations that until, our patience has become very clarified, so to speak. It just becomes so clear and easy for us. Until that happens, we are going to really need to put forth some effort to forbear some things. And is there another translation of 150?
For a long time, I will take pleasure in seeing him be humiliated. I will make him the laughingstock of all and an object of ridicule and blame.
For a long time, I shall look with pleasure at his being made inferior. He will become the laughingstock of all, regarded among everyone as an object of scorn and derision.
So I think those match.
Yeah, that do the chagas yolsum.
So
Do you
does so
Ika
now
shashana?
Yeah, so maybe we could leave it there with the text as we're heading into the 6 o'clock hour. And does anyone have any questions? What questions do you have?
Que si di si chima chijin sabe si najin ji ko di yongmena tagi phage chonju disipum zana la damga nindwa ta ning pa da saba chini samudaya chi yang ngajal densem te su keruchu te jugo ane nga chanju sebe nyamlen chegen jige dusye oto dusye yana yandu jangi na ranchinzin la kyonjal karso nimi thongela shiba pendo yongure jizam nimi thongzre ranchinzin shu chungro ranchinzin shu chung chen rozri nyomo shu chungro wa te pendo yare sabe nyomo shu chungro la danze mariba ke gore de ranchinzin de nyomo to so hui tar dangoro
So
tar mindo ele kebre yongoro ranchinzin shu chungro yana nyomo ke ngomata dar maribal ke goro maribal karang gombu arian dewa ge disono lule liwan chijin du timukula nekirde lule liwan chijin du timukula nekirde kanche timu chombe gyurza sungare liwan lula pe wangpu manda ngayorwa cheza miwande nawang le khabyo marwa nawande luwang le khabyo marwa luwang de pa chazang le khabyo marwa timu singde pa luwang na jin re lar kangka le khamde ke te timu ti chome ina nyomu jemba kanga chomru res te pe misiba ke chimbo cha de ore cheta ko nyomu ngone me zo ela da zanji marbe ke gore de ranchinjin kazo shu chung de nyomu tape la niba chung ru gore gyaje ke dambe chag ru gore ko ranchinjin timudigi ke ranchinjin ge pe ti shu chur niba chur tang gore tujin du gore kangazo ne kambo sa tu ni chumoluna khokki marwa ote najin re chulu najin cha de ore ranchinjin de ene mari bade sabun zoni cha de ore
Kari sabun chagire
mari bade sabun
Marika
nyomo
sabun
ke sabun shazan rang ngazo nyomo shur chur dangona ranchinjin so shu nipa cha go de pe ke chimbo cha de ore
And so, you know, when you read through these verses, remember that, you know, there's different ways they can be interpreted, just as this one commentary gives two different ways to look at it. And some, it speaks about identifying this through the old self or the, you know, former unreformed self and the new reformed self. And there's some verses that are about purposefully eliciting emotional states of competitiveness and jealousy and so forth, and then, you know, kind of letting those steep and then coming out of it and seeing the fault in it and so forth. So it's either looking from the new perspective at the old kind of misbehaving self, or instigating those emotions and then seeing the fault in them. But in any event, read them again and again, in whichever way you're interpreting them, whichever way is appropriate in that particular verse. It will be what helps for the self-centered attitude to decline. And when the self-centered attitude declines, then the afflictive emotions decline, because you've taken what the root of where the afflictive emotions come from, and you're beginning to have it diminish, and then therefore the afflictive emotions diminish. And remember, the afflictive emotions all come out of unconsciousness or ignorance. And so there is this quote that speaks to, just as when we say the whole body, that covers all of the different faculties, just as when we say body, it covers all of the the five sense faculties and so forth. When we talk about ignorance, ignorance is the one that has governance over all the afflictive emotions. So for example, if we were to just say eye consciousness, right? Eye consciousness doesn't cover all of the other sense faculties, but when we say the faculty of body, that covers them all. When we say ignorance, ignorance is the governant over all of the afflictions. They're all included when we say ignorance. And so if we want to lessen the power of the afflictive emotions, then lessening self-cherishing does diminish the power of the afflictive emotions. But if we really, want to, completely cover it, it's ignorance. It's really eliminating ignorance that eliminates them all. So when we don't have ignorance, or for example, if we don't have self-cherishing, the others can't grow. Just like planting, so the other afflictive emotions can't grow. When we plant a seed in the dry ground, it doesn't grow forth. Without self-cherishing, the afflictive emotions can't grow. When you add self-cherishing, it's like adding water to that seed and allowing it to grow. And so ignorance really is what allows that seed of all of the afflictions to really grow forth. And so what it really comes down to is being completely unconscious and ignorant.
Yeah, Diane, I just wanted to say something. I just wanted to thank Geshe-la for for taking us back through how to interpret this section at the beginning, because that was really helpful. I didn't understand that before, and it made it so much more understandable, and also just a clear teaching on these different methods about how to, for me, what I heard was being able to kind of put myself in others' shoes and see how they're viewing their say I'm in a situation with someone where I'm irritated or annoyed or something like that, and being able to really put those feelings aside and put myself in the other person's shoes and understand what they may be feeling that has nothing to do with me, but is a real feeling for them, and then how to have more patience about how to respond then. So yeah.
Ani Geshe-la Shia Chikla Tangpo Ani Kirang Selshe Nangya De Tuchiche Dingon Langonenga Tata Hako Masong Kirangi Droshe Kyune Ta Di Sik Jedi Lokdu Ani Kandres Koa Lenya Ta Hako Song Ngone Pentok Chung Tuchiche Dingon Langa Yapo Hako Masong. They might say, Pena, pena nge keru juk nga ani pena ngala mi shandakla kare shugore keru juk di nyomong yurken ke migi sanlo di that's de kola ani hakona dene di jela mixelgi netzel chungna nga zerpa gomya ani ta zerpa gom sigure pena nga lunglangya ki lo di hakone mi shandeki ngala lunglangna dene nga zerpa gomya ani le lawa yongere tuchiche
뒤che 들어와.
yeah na ta hako ha nga
이제 학과 좀 뱀말다. 또서 균도 삼노당 꽤 첨벌해. 근데 삼노당나 펜도다 된데 연구도 와. 삼노당한테 쉬우게 첨벌해. 내 준주지마 지진도 여름지 킹메서는 내가 가봐시 지금 알아. 이나 가서 수면나 일기대 저래 빼지어래. 수면나 수에서 일기 레전다데 되나지 빠빠지 준주 도서로 삼다 수수강 과다 삼다나 또 세면 뱀부 연구로
so
이거 삼다 쓰리네 배 살로 놓야지래.
And so, you know, it's really good that it's been beneficial for you. And so now, you know, understanding it, and it's very good that you've understood it, you know, more at this point. But now even think more about it, because that's what this takes. This takes us really thinking more about this. So it does even take more self-reflection, so continue. And Geshe-la says that, you know, he's not able to teach it like perhaps exactly as it should be, or exactly as His Holiness has, you know, has explained. But, you know, what he does understand is that this takes, you know, us to think about it even more and more. Just like someone without teeth would need to chew their food even more so than someone who might cut through it with their teeth. Someone without teeth is going to have to gnaw on it more and more and more to bring, you know, to bring it to the point where it could be really like swallowed and absorbed. And this is like us needing to think and think about it again and again.
지마지진지 마셔놓고 초중에 땐두고 와. 아니 뒤가라 삼노다 두스나 기니 배자말로벌 또 스타가 연구를 삼들라고 얼마다 나 전주 탐자 공도 주디 있으라고 말다. 전중에 시가 말해. 아마 뒤컵도 떼게 단다 뒤컵도 될라. 아마가 전주 땅보 지디가랑아 기는 거기 쓰기도 좀 마서. 내 사람 부주래. 되니 디가 팬더십을 떼서. 아니 여름지 디스무다. 저 전주 땅보 지디 결혼해서 다 전주 시작이 하마거나 전주 빼잘로. 아니 몰라 저게 그러다 징길 없이 삼다스 여름지 건져 쓰는데. 이 팬더 연구를 쓰면서. 시부 자첨버레스 전주 승인데 샘라페 팬보여레스.
And so this is an incredibly precious and sacred text. And it's a text that His Holiness has said is something that we will need to study and read again. And if you have read it and maybe not completely absorbed the meaning, His Holiness says to, you know, take the text and, you know, place it on the top of your head, supplicating for blessings to fully, really understand, to be able to fully understand the text, and placing it on the crown of your head in this way is beneficial. And Geshe-la says that, you know, no worries for like not understanding it at first and needing to reread and reread it to really get it. Because he says he himself, you know, in the beginning when he read it, especially the section that we're on, he didn't get the full meaning of it either. That he himself, Geshe-la, has needed to, you know, and he counts on and depends on these very precious commentaries to really bring forth the fullness of the meaning, because this is something he has had to develop and evolve his understanding of this. And he says that he's not saying he knows it well, he's continuing to evolve in his understanding and really relies on the commentaries. And for us, we, you know, we're going to need to really think about this. And, you know, as you know, you've brought up with this question, Laura, of needing to put ourselves in the shoes of someone else who's afflicted, to be able to then be in a situation where we can have patience with someone who's facing us with these afflictions and so forth. But continue to think about it. Kerang tenjia.
So, 여러분 지금 전주 살지나 나이나 등가 발전하래 나주래.
And Geshe-la says he's also received the instructions, these teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama 4 or 5 times already. Except for being able to go into that commentary and investigate it, there are still some, you know, some verses that he still has to go to the commentaries to figure out, to really understand well.
전주 시계에서 보바다 요마르다. 대 보바 요마래. 이나다 치 또서 로준다나 펭그리 섬들로 펭그리 섬거다. 나랑라 펭그리 제나 펭그리 섬거래.
Papa kerang la papa yomare.
전주 시계에서도 보바 요마르세.
So he's not fully confident that he knows it 100% yet, you know, that he has like all of this confidence, you know, strict confidence that he knows it. He still goes in to the commentaries to really get certain clarification. Any other questions?
Yeah. 다 간시 전주 야부 가서 둡둡로 대는 미세게 여름지도 송도 저벨리우당 단다 삼된 리우디니 에 그뒤나 론데네 야부어서 가는 것도
Zepadang something 기요.
대 최민은 최케 밀랭인지나 때로나 세는 기부 연구에서 송도 여름지 당한 주이나 때리게 망바 인디가라 리우당부배 개침보라 저기 셈기 파인 전주기 셈이 답에 남란티니 순거래. 아니 때다 남바인데 걸었다 리우주가 자침보시지래. 뭐네 말한서 남바인은 리우주가 가서 두두 니 말이래. 지 가시를 칸든지 니마 참했지 너니나 벤다야래. 쇼로가니 숨리로 에네 삼당 양 쇼로가니 숨리로 망보지 로에네 두스치 제거해요 말에. 쇼로가지 니마 참mel로 론데나 근데 삼다나 semle 레기로 와.
Leo chugi korlare 아니 leo kat
가레나 다 쇼로가지 니지로 방제로기나 디거로. 아니 tel라 삼다 니마 닝가 양로 양 삼다 아니 뒤즈네 뒤서대 톨란두 마라. 아니 서서 셈라페 트론랑 레기레. 삼로스타에는 지 인데금이도 니메 촉적은 러시아거든.
And so, you know, to read this text again and again is something that is so beneficial, to read this really precious text. And especially His Holiness is always saying, especially reading the the chapter on patience and this chapter on meditative concentration, His Holiness is saying, even recommends for people who aren't Buddhist or who, aren't religious, that if they study those two chapters, that they will come to a place of peace of mind. This will bring them peace. And so for us, as dedicated Buddhist practitioners, even more so, the first chapter as well, the chapter on the qualities of bodhicitta and the benefits of bodhicitta, enormously beneficial. This is something that we should really read again and again. And chapter 10 is also pointed out to be a very profound chapter, a chapter that needs to be read in a way that we only take it in little bits, really letting the profundity come to really dawn in our minds. And that chapter, and as well as any chapter, Geshe-la said, read just, two verses. Read them and contemplate them all day, every hour of the day. Keep it in your mind. Go back and read those two and contemplate those day and night, and spend your 24 hours in that way, taking only one or two and really letting them sink in, really mulling them over. And in that way, if we take our day and structure it in that way, then we won't waste, any hour of the day. Otherwise, if we don't kind of program or structure it, the day goes by so quick, sometimes without, accomplishing so much. But in this way, we won't waste any time, and we'll stay connected to it and really engaged, in a very engaged and, really be very kind of excited about it and very, very engaged with it. So do this one or two paragraphs in a day.
Yeah. Any yo chupa tatarita. Onda.
So it's 6 o'clock. It's exactly now. Geshe-la says sorry.
Kare. Chanchu samcho rimbo che ma ke pana kenguru chi kyawa nyamba me one kondo pewa so kare rawe kurvi shingante pendante wa mani Tereze on tenzin jato isha pe site parto tenguru chi injamba pawe chitar kem kondo zambo ten tejin teta kungi shiso dalo chirpe wante ta ratongo tesun shebe kyawa tamche keng ma kanla chutung ajengewe to ante kunja zambo chuchi ratongo wareki.
Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase further and further. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person, Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyamtso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience and Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Geshe-la and Diane.
Thank you. Diane also. Thank you, Diane.
Oh, thank you,
guys.
Geshe-la. Of course, my pleasure.
Diane menangachi Marta.
Geshe-la says if he doesn't have a translator, he has no tongue. He has, no
That's
way
right.
to speak.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's always my great, great honor and pleasure. Always.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank
Take
you,
good
thank you.
care, everyone.